Elder, are humans really just a myth? The adolescent Vungnil asked, its facial tendrils quivering with curiosity. The elder Vungnil, Calthax, settled deeper into his resting cushion in the communal chamber of their habitat complex. His exoskeleton creaked slightly with age, and his facial tendrils drooped with what appeared to be a mixture of nostalgia and sorrow. He had expected this question eventually. It was practically a rite of passage for young Vungnil approaching their military service to ask about the legendary humans. "They are very real, young one," Calthax replied, his voice carrying the gravelly resonance of advanced age. "Or at least they were. Whether they still exist is a matter of much debate." "Then why have I never seen one?" the adolescent persisted. "In all our education modules, humans are described as the most formidable strategists the galaxy has ever known. Our military doctrines are said to be adaptations of their warfare manuals. Yet they appear in no recent galactic census, hold no seats on any council, and maintain no embassies. How can a species so consequential simply vanish?" Calthax's primary eyes fixed on the youth, while his secondary eyes drifted toward the habitat's viewport, where the stars shimmered against the backdrop of space. The distant blue-green gas giant that their orbital habitat circled cast a faint, ethereal glow into the chamber. "It is a long and complicated history," Calthax said finally. "One that the Galactic Assembly would prefer to forget, or at least sanitize for the benefit of the younger generations. But as your elder, I believe you deserve the truth. Are you prepared to listen without interruption? Some of what I will tell you contradicts your formal education." The adolescent immediately folded its forelegs beneath its thorax, assuming the traditional posture of attentive learning. Its eyes brightened with anticipation. "I am ready, Elder." Calthax reached for a nearby console, dimming the chamber's ambient lighting. His movements were deliberate as he activated a small worn holographic projector, a relic by modern standards. The device hummed to life, projecting a three-dimensional image of a bipedal being with pinkish tan skin, sparse fur primarily on the top of its head, and only 2 arms. "A human," Calthax said simply. "This particular one was named Eliza Chen. She was a friend." The adolescent's eyes widened. "You knew humans personally?" "Indeed. For many cycles, I served as our people's primary diplomatic liaison to the human government on their homeworld, Earth." Calthax's tendrils rippled with what might have been pride. This was long before the convergence, of course, when the Vungnil still maintained independent diplomatic relations. The hologram shifted, displaying a vibrant blue and green planet with swirling white cloud formations. "Earth, beautiful, isn't it? Humans evolved on a world with approximately 70% water coverage, which perhaps explains their remarkable adaptability. Their planet featured extreme environmental variations, from scorching deserts to frozen tundras, dense jungles to barren mountains. The humans not only survived in all these environments but thrived in them." The hologram changed again, showing clusters of towering structures, human cities, spread across different landscapes. "When I first encountered humans, they were relatively new to interstellar travel. They had developed faster-than-light capabilities only 3 centuries earlier, which made them practically infants in galactic terms. Yet in that short time, they had established colonies on more than 40 worlds." Calthax's tendrils twitched with amusement. Most species assumed they were expansionists, like the Jargril or the Tellarites. But that wasn't quite accurate. Humans were explorers. They seemed driven by an insatiable curiosity, a need to see what lay beyond the next horizon. The elder manipulated the projector again, and the image shifted to show humans interacting with various alien species. There were humans in environmental suits floating alongside jellyfish-like Mechari, others competing in some kind of sporting event with the massive 6-limbed Blandovians, and still others sharing drinks with the crystalline Jansi foe. This was what made humans truly unique among sapient species, Colfax continued. Their unprecedented ability to adapt not just to environments but to social contexts. They formed meaningful bonds with species whose biology, psychology, and culture could not have been more different from their own. The adolescent's head tilted slightly, but if they were so adaptable and friendly, why do our military instructors speak of them with such reverence and fear? Colfax's tendrils stiffened, because what the galaxy failed to understand about humans was that their adaptability was a double-edged blade. The same flexibility that allowed them to form bonds with alien species also enabled them to rapidly transform their entire civilization when threatened. The hologram shifted again, now showing human historical imagery, primitive humans wielding simple weapons, then tanks rolling across battlefields, aircraft dropping explosives, and finally thermonuclear detonations. Unlike most spacefaring species, humans nearly destroyed themselves multiple times before reaching the stars. Their history is littered with conflicts of increasingly devastating scope. World wars, they called them, conflicts that engulfed their entire planet. By the time they achieved space travel, they had developed weapons capable of rendering their entire homeworld uninhabitable. The adolescent's tendrils curled in surprise. They waged war against themselves, with planet-killing weapons, indeed. And what's more remarkable is that they stepped back from the brink. When I met humans, they had spent centuries rebuilding their society around principles of cooperation and peaceful coexistence. They were determined to leave their violent past behind them. The humans I knew were philosophers, artists, scientists, and diplomats. They had transformed their warlike instincts into a passion for creation and discovery. Colfax's tertiary eyes dimmed slightly. I believed, as did many others, that humans had transcended their violent nature. We were wrong. We simply hadn't seen what happens when humans are pushed beyond their tolerance for injustice. The elder paused, his breathing growing more labored. The adolescent waited patiently, sensing the gravity of what was to come. It began with the Jargril, Colfax said finally. You know of them from your history texts, though much has been sanitized. The fallen founders, the adolescent recited, one of the 4 founding species of the Galactic Assembly, now extinct due to a catastrophic civil war. Colfax made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Civil war, how convenient an explanation. No, young one, the Jargril did not destroy themselves. They were systematically eradicated by the humans. The adolescent's eyes widened in shock. But how? The Jargril were legendary warriors, naturally armored with superior strength and reflexes. Our texts say they dominated galactic military affairs for over 20,000 cycles before their fall. All true, Colfax confirmed. The Jargril were physically imposing, naturally aggressive, and culturally oriented toward martial prowess. They had been the galaxy's undisputed military power since the formation of the Assembly, and perhaps that was the problem. They had never faced a true challenge. They had grown arrogant, believing their supremacy was inevitable, rather than contingent. The hologram shifted to display a tall reptilian being with armored scales, powerful limbs ending in wicked claws, and a face dominated by predatory features. This was Ambassador HFY of the Jargril hegemony. I negotiated with him many times during my diplomatic career. He was, like most Jargril, condescending toward lesser species, but generally reasonable when it served their interests. Colfax's tendrils curled with distaste. He was among those who advocated for the invasion of human territory. Why did they invade? The adolescent asked, unable to contain the question. The official reason was a territorial dispute over a mineral-rich asteroid belt in a border system. But in truth, I believe it was a calculated message. The Jargril were concerned about humanity's rapidly growing influence. Despite their youth as a spacefaring species, humans had already become economic powerhouses, developing trade networks that reached every corner of the galaxy. Their cultural exports, art, entertainment, philosophy, were being consumed by species across known space. Colfax's upper limbs gestured expansively. The Jargral, I think, intended to put the humans in their place, to demonstrate that despite human economic and cultural influence, military power remained the ultimate arbiter of galactic politics. They expected a brief one-sided conflict that would end with humans accepting Jargral supremacy. The Elder's tendrils drooped even further. What no one anticipated was the response. The Jargral struck 3 human colony worlds, small outposts with minimal defenses, and they did not simply conquer them, they committed atrocities. Cities were bombed from orbit, civilians were slaughtered en masse, entire ecosystems were poisoned, and the Jargral broadcast it all across galactic networks. The hologram displayed scenes of devastation, burning cities, crumbling structures, and suffering civilians. Colfax quickly switched it off, as if the images were still too painful to view. The humans appealed to the Galactic Assembly for intervention. I was present during those sessions. Colfax's voice faltered. I spoke in favor of collective action against the Jargral aggression, but the Assembly, dominated by the founding species and their closest allies, refused to act. No one wanted to challenge the Jargral military machine. What did the humans do? The adolescent asked quietly. First, they mourned. I was on Earth when news of the atrocities reached their homeworld. I witnessed something I had never seen before, and hoped never to see again, an entire species united in grief and rage. Within days their governments had merged command structures, their corporations retooled for war production, their citizens volunteered for military service in numbers that strained their processing centers. Colfax's breathing had become shallow, his memories clearly distressing him. 7 standard days after the Jargral ended their broadcast of the atrocities, all non-humans were expelled from human space. I was forced to leave behind friends and colleagues with no opportunity to say goodbye. The humans sent a single message to the Assembly. They were withdrawing from all galactic institutions and treaties, and they considered themselves at war with the Jargral hegemony. Any power that aided the Jargral would be deemed an enemy of humanity. The adolescent's posture had become rigid with tension. What happened next? The Assembly dismissed it as human bravado. The Jargral representatives openly mocked the Human Declaration, asking what a species of soft-skinned traders and philosophers could possibly do against the greatest military power in the galaxy. Colfax's tendrils quivered. 90 standard days later, we had our answer. Colfax paused, collecting himself. The humans struck with a coordinated attack across 20 Jargral systems simultaneously. Not colony worlds or outlying territories, core worlds, military bases, fleet installations, production centers. The Jargral had expected a gradual build-up, a series of skirmishes along the border that would allow them to showcase their superiority. Instead, the humans bypassed conventional defenses entirely. How? The adolescent asked, captivated. They had developed a new form of FTL technology, one that allowed them to make micro-jumps within star systems, bypassing defensive perimeters. Their ships appeared without warning, in low orbit around Jargral planets. And these weren't conventional warships. They had converted mining vessels, cargo haulers, and passenger liners into engines of war. The Elder's voice had taken on a hollow quality, and the weapons, young one, the weapons they deployed defied comprehension. Atmospheric converters that turned breathable air into poison, gravity manipulators that created localized distortions, tearing Jargral cities apart at the molecular level, nanite swarms that disabled technology and disintegrated armor, including the natural armor of Jargral bodies. Colfax's primary eyes closed briefly, as if trying to shut out the memories. The humans broadcast it all, just as the Jargral had done. They wanted the galaxy to witness what happens when humanity's capacity for creation is channeled into destruction. Did the Jargral fight back? The adolescent asked. Of course. They were warriors to their core, but they were fighting an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The humans didn't engage in traditional space battles or ground warfare, where Jargral physical superiority would give them an advantage. They struck from unexpected vectors, used unconventional tactics, and prioritized maximum damage over heroic confrontations. Colfax reopened the holographic projector, displaying a recording of a human military officer addressing what appeared to be a fleet command center. "We don't need to defeat their ships," the human said, her face a mask of cold determination. "We don't need to occupy their worlds. We need to make the cost of continuing this conflict so unbearable that no Jargral will ever again contemplate harming a human being." Colfax shut off the projector again. That was Admiral Helena Mikhailova, who led the human counter-offensive. She was once the Minister of Interstellar Commerce. I had dined in her home, met her offspring. She had been an advocate for peaceful integration with the galactic community. And there she was, orchestrating what would become known as the Jargral decimation. Decimation, the adolescent repeated, unfamiliar with the term, a human word. Originally, it referred to killing 1 in every 10 members of a military unit as punishment. But what the humans did to the Jargral went far beyond that. Within one standard cycle, 40% of the Jargral population was dead. Their military infrastructure was in ruins. Their government was in chaos. Colfax's voice had become a near whisper. The Galactic Assembly finally intervened then, offering to broker a peace agreement. The humans accepted the Assembly representatives into their territory for negotiations. I was part of the delegation. The Elder's tendrils twisted in what appeared to be profound discomfort. I expected to find my human friends chastened by what they had done, perhaps even horrified by their own capacity for violence. Instead, I found them transformed, cold, methodical. They presented their terms without emotion: complete Jargral surrender, disarmament of all Jargral military forces, human oversight of all Jargral worlds, for a period of no less than 50 cycles, and reparations that would effectively bankrupt the hegemony for generations. Did the Jargral agree? The adolescent asked. The Assembly representatives urged them to accept, but the Jargral leadership refused. They believed that capitulating to the humans would be a cultural death sentence, that without their martial traditions and autonomy, they would cease to be Jargral in any meaningful sense. Colfax's breathing had become labored, and he paused to collect himself. When negotiations failed, the humans implemented what they called their final solution. They deployed a bioweapon specifically engineered to target Jargral physiology. It was slow-acting, highly contagious, and virtually undetectable until the final stages. By the time the Jargral realized what was happening, it had spread throughout their territory. The adolescent's tendrils coiled tightly against its face in horror. They committed genocide. The humans preferred to call it species retirement, Colfax said bitterly. They designed the pathogen to sterilize rather than kill outright. The existing Jargral population would live out their natural lifespans, but there would be no next generation. Within 300 cycles, the Jargral species, one of the founding members of the Galactic Assembly, a civilization with over 30,000 cycles of history, was extinct. Silence fell over the chamber as the adolescent processed this information. Finally, it spoke again. But if humans were capable of such efficiency in warfare, why are they not the dominant power in the galaxy now? Why have they isolated themselves? Colfax's tendrils rippled in what might have been discomfort. The aftermath of the Jargral decimation changed humanity as profoundly as it changed the galaxy. From what little information has leaked from human space over the centuries,
Their society fractured over the ethics of what they had done. Some factions celebrated their victory and advocated for humanity to claim the Jagral's position as the galaxy's military superpower. Others were horrified by the wholesale destruction they had wrought and pushed for a return to their earlier pacifist ideals. The Elder manipulated his holographic projector again, displaying an older human with silver hair and wearing elaborate formal attire. This was President Omar Washington of the United Earth Government. After the war, he addressed not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. His words have been largely purged from official records, but I have preserved them. The hologram flickered, and the human began to speak. We have demonstrated to the galaxy and to ourselves what humanity is capable of when provoked beyond endurance. We have shown that our capacity for retribution is limited only by our imagination, not by our technology or our resolve. And in doing so, we have become what we most feared, a species defined by its ability to destroy rather than create. The human's expression was grave, his eyes filled with something that looked like profound wariness. Therefore, we choose to remove ourselves from the galactic stage, not out of shame or fear, but out of recognition that the path we have walked leads only to further darkness. Humanity will return to its borders. We will neither seek nor accept diplomatic relations with any galactic power. We will defend our territory with absolute commitment, but we will expand no further. The human paused, his gaze seeming to penetrate across time and space to fix directly on the viewers. Let the galaxy remember what we are capable of, and let that memory serve as both warning and protection for future generations of humanity. We hope one day to rejoin the community of civilizations, but only when we are certain that we can do so without compromising what remains of our humanity. Colfax switched off the projector. That was the last official communication from human government to the Galactic Assembly. They severed all diplomatic ties, dismantled their embassies, and recalled all their citizens from non-human space. They established a buffer zone around their territory, what we now call the Void, and automated defensive systems that destroy any vessel that attempts to cross without authorization. The adolescent's posture had become less formal, its tendrils moving in patterns that indicated deep thought. But our instructors still study human military doctrine. How is that possible, if they've been isolated for so long? Our Colfax's tendrils fluttered with something like pride. Before they withdrew, the humans deposited a comprehensive archive in the Galactic Library on Centaurus Prime. Military theory, technological schematics, historical analyses, philosophical treatises, a carefully curated selection of human knowledge. The accompanying message described it as a gift to a galaxy we hope will evolve beyond the need for such information.
The Elder's tendrils drooped again. The irony, of course, is that every major power immediately focused on the military and technological information, largely ignoring the philosophical and ethical components that the humans clearly considered equally important. Have there been no contacts with humans since their withdrawal? The adolescent asked. Occasional, unverified reports emerge of human observers at the edges of known space. Some traders claim to have encountered human vessels operating under false registry. There are even rumors that some humans chose to remain in the wider galaxy, disguising themselves or altering their appearance to blend with near-human species. Colfax manipulated the projector one last time, displaying an image of himself, much younger, surrounded by a group of smiling humans. They appeared to be in some kind of recreational facility, with colorful decorations and a strange confection with small flames atop it. This was my final gathering with my human friends before the Jacral invasion changed everything. They were celebrating what they called a birthday, the anniversary of my emergence from the spawning pool. It was customary among humans to commemorate such dates with gatherings, gifts, and these ceremonial foods called cakes. The elder's voice had grown softer, filled with unmistakable nostalgia. What you must understand, young one, is that humans were not inherently warlike or peaceful. They were adaptable, capable of profound compassion and creativity, but equally capable of calculated brutality when they believed it necessary. Their greatest strength and their greatest vulnerability was their capacity to transform themselves to meet any challenge. Colfax switched off the projector and turned all his eyes toward the adolescent. The militaristic humans who destroyed the Jackrel and the pacifistic humans who befriended me were the same species, often the same individuals, just responding to different circumstances. That is what makes them so formidable, and that is why the galaxy still studies their methods centuries after they removed themselves from galactic affairs. The elder's tendrils straightened with sudden formality. You asked earlier if humans are merely myths. They are very real, young one. And somewhere beyond the void, they are watching, evolving, perhaps waiting. The question that haunts the Galactic Assembly is not whether humans still exist, but what version of humanity might one day return to the galactic stage. The adolescent sat in silence for several moments, processing everything it had heard. Finally, it spoke again, its voice barely audible. Do you think they will ever return? Colfax's tendrils rippled with uncertainty. I do not know, but if they do, I hope it will be the humans I once knew who return. The explorers, the friends, the builders of bridges between different forms of life. Not the architects of extinction that the Jackrel awakened. The elder rose slowly from his cushion, his exoskeleton creaking with the movement. You should rest now. Your military education begins tomorrow, and you will need your strength. Elder, the adolescent said hesitantly, if what you've told me is true, why does the Assembly allow our instructors to glorify human military doctrine? Shouldn't we be taught to fear such methodologies? Colfax's tendrils curved in a gesture that might have been a sad smile. Because, young one, the Assembly believes that understanding human warfare will protect us, should they ever return as conquerors. What they fail to realize is that human ingenuity means they would never use the same strategies twice. By the time humanity returns to galactic society, if they ever do, they will have evolved beyond anything we can predict. The elder moved toward the chamber exit, then paused. Remember this, young one. The humans I knew valued nothing more highly than friendship freely given, and loyalty freely chosen. If humanity returns, it will be those qualities, not their capacity for violence, that will determine whether they come as friends or foes. With that, Colfax left the communal chamber, leaving the adolescent alone with its thoughts and the stars visible through the viewport, somewhere among which might be the legendary humans, watching and waiting. Admiral Helena Mikhailova stood at the observation deck of the UES Retribution, gazing at the blue-green world that slowly rotated below. New Eden, they called it, the furthest human colony from Earth, now transformed into a fortress world guarding the border of human space. The irony of the name was not lost on her. Admiral, the council is assembled and waiting, her aide said from behind her. Helena nodded, but didn't immediately turn. How long has it been, Commander Chen? Since we withdrew from the galaxy. 173 standard years, Admiral, the younger officer replied promptly. And in that time, we've built more warships than in all of human history prior to the Jackrel War. We've developed weapons that make the decimation arsenal look like children's toys. We've hardened our borders to the point that not even light escapes without our permission. Helena finally turned to face her aide. Tell me, Commander, are we safer? Commander Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty. The Strategic Assessment Division reports no credible external threats to human space, Admiral. That wasn't my question, Helena said softly. The younger officer hesitated, then spoke carefully. My grandmother served under you during the decimation, Admiral. She once told me that the greatest casualty of that war wasn't the Jackrel, it was our humanity. Helena's weathered face showed no reaction, but she nodded slightly. Your grandmother was Eliza Chen, wasn't she? A brilliant tactician. She led the strike on Jackrel Prime. Yes, Admiral. And after the war she became one of the most vocal advocates for the restoration movement. Helena's lips curved in a small, sad smile. I know. We disagreed profoundly on the path humanity should take after our withdrawal. She believed we should work to reclaim our former ideals of peaceful coexistence. I maintained that the galaxy had shown us its true nature, and we needed to prepare accordingly. The Admiral turned back to the viewport. New Eden's northern hemisphere was entering night, and lights from the massive defense installations were becoming visible as glittering constellations against the darkening surface. And yet here we are, Commander. The Vigilance faction and the Restoration movement, locked in the same endless debate while we build more weapons and erect higher walls. Commander Chen stepped forward to stand beside the Admiral. The Council vote today could change that, Admiral. The Restoration proposal, to send observer teams back into galactic society. Yes, I'm aware. Helena's voice carried a century of wariness. A first step toward potential reintegration. You oppose it? Chen asked, though it wasn't really a question. I used to. Helena turned to fully face the younger officer. Commander, do you know what I did before the war? Chen blinked, surprised by the question. You were Minister of Interstellar Commerce, I believe. Yes, I negotiated trade agreements. I attended diplomatic functions. I had friends among the Vongnil, the Mikari, even a few Blandovians, despite their general standoffishness. Helena's gaze drifted back to the planet below. I had a garden. I grew orchids from a dozen worlds. I played the cello. She fell silent for a moment. After the Jackrel attacked our colonies, I put all that aside. I became what humanity needed me to be, a weapon. And I was very, very good at it. Commander Chen remained silent, sensing the Admiral was building to something important. The Vigilance faction believes isolation is our only protection. The Restoration movement believes engagement is our path to redemption. Both are wrong. Helena's voice had taken on a more authoritative tone. Isolation has turned us inward, made us paranoid. We see threats in shadows. We've built a society prepared for a war that may never come, at the cost of the peace we could be enjoying. Are you saying you now support the Restoration proposal? Chen asked carefully. I'm saying I'm tired, Commander. Tired of living in a fortress. Tired of seeing generation after generation of humans trained for a conflict that exists primarily in our collective memory and imagination. Helena straightened her uniform, still the same austere design from the war, hardly changed in nearly 2 centuries. The galaxy has moved on. The species that abandoned us to the Jackrel have paid for their cowardice through centuries of living in fear of our return. Perhaps it's time we moved on as well. The Admiral's communicator chimed, signaling the Council's impatience. She silenced it with a tap. Your grandmother once told me that the measure of our humanity wasn't how effectively we could punish our enemies, but how completely we could forgive them. Helena's expression softened momentarily. I dismissed her then as naive. Perhaps I was the naive one, believing that walls and weapons could protect what makes us human. She gestured toward the door. Come, Commander. Let's not keep the Council waiting any longer. As they walked through the corridors of the massive flagship, crew members snapped to attention. Admiral Mikhailova was a living legend, the architect of humanity's most decisive military victory, and the longest-serving member of the Defense Council. Few knew that she had originally been appointed to provide a voice of caution against more aggressive elements. Over the decades, she had become the very symbol of humanity's military transformation. The council chamber was austere, a circular room with a central holographic display and 12 seats arranged around it. 10 of the seats were already occupied when Helena entered, with Commander Chen taking a position against the wall with other aides and advisors. Admiral Mikhailova,
the council chair acknowledged. "We were beginning to wonder if you would join us. My apologies for the delay, Councillor Yang." Helena took her seat. "I was taking a moment to appreciate the view of New Eden. It's been some time since I visited the frontier." "Perhaps that's appropriate," said Councillor Okafor, the most vocal member of the Vigilance faction, "given that today's vote concerns breaching the isolation protocols that have kept our frontier and all of human space secure for nearly 2 centuries. Helena said nothing, merely inclining her head in acknowledgement. The traditional opening remarks and procedural matters proceeded, but there was a palpable tension in the chamber. Everyone knew this vote was potentially historic. Finally, the council chair activated the central holographic display, which showed a detailed map of known space, divided into human territory, the buffer zone commonly known as the Void, and the territories of the various galactic powers beyond. "The proposal before the council," Yang stated formally, "is to authorize the deployment of covert observation teams to key locations within galactic assembly space, with the goal of gathering current intelligence on technological, political, and social developments. This would represent the first official human presence beyond the Void since the implementation of the isolation protocols." Councillor Okafor leaned forward. "Before we vote, I believe Admiral Mikhailova should share the Defense Intelligence assessment of the security implications. As the senior military voice on this council, her perspective is crucial." All eyes turned to Helena. This was the moment everyone had been anticipating. For decades, she had been the staunchest advocate for maintaining humanity's vigilant isolation. Her opposition to any form of re-engagement was a matter of public record. Helena took a moment before speaking, her gaze moving from face to face around the table. Some were openly hostile to the proposal, others hopeful, and a few carefully maintained neutral expressions. "The Defense Intelligence assessment," she began in her measured voice, "indicates minimal security risk from limited observation missions, provided they are conducted with proper protocols and by personnel with appropriate training." A murmur ran through the chamber. This was not the response anyone had expected. Admiral Okafor said, barely concealing his shock, "For years you've argued that any breach of our isolation represents an unacceptable security risk. Has the assessment changed so dramatically?" "The assessment hasn't changed, Councillor," Helena replied evenly. "My interpretation of it has." She stood approaching the holographic display. With a few gestures, she expanded the view to show the entire galaxy. "For nearly 2 centuries, we have maintained what we believed was a necessary separation from galactic society. We did so initially out of a need to process our grief and rage after the Jackral atrocities and the galaxy's abandonment. We continued it out of fear that re-engagement would either corrupt us or expose us to new threats." Helena manipulated the display again, highlighting key strategic locations throughout assembly space. "In that time, we've relied on automated probes and long-range sensors for our intelligence gathering. The information they provide is fragmentary, at best dangerously incomplete at worst. All the more reason to maintain our isolation," Okafor interjected. "The unknown represents potential threat." "The unknown represents reality, Councillor," Helena countered. "And reality doesn't disappear because we choose to ignore it." She gestured toward the display again. "Our latest intelligence suggests significant political realignment within the Assembly following the Centaurian succession crisis. The Tellarites are expanding their influence into regions formerly dominated by the Makari collective. The Blandovian Imperium appears to be fracturing along ideological lines, and there are reports of a new species achieving FTL capabilities along the outer arm." Helena turned to face her colleagues directly. "We are making strategic assessments based on incomplete data about a galaxy that has evolved while we've remained static. That is not vigilance, it's willful blindness. Are you suggesting we should simply throw open our borders?" Okafor demanded. "Invite the galaxy back in after they abandoned us to the Jackral?" I am suggesting, Helena said firmly, that 2 centuries is long enough to punish the entire galaxy for the cowardice of a single generation. I am suggesting that humanity cannot truly progress while defining itself primarily by its capacity for retribution. The chamber had gone completely silent. Many present had never heard the legendary admiral speak so candidly. The observation missions proposed by the Restoration movement represent a measured first step, nothing more. They pose minimal security risk while offering significant intelligence value. But more importantly, they represent something humanity has lacked for too long: hope for a future beyond our self-imposed exile. Helena returned to her seat. That is the Defense Intelligence Assessment, Councillors. I recommend approval of the proposal. The vote that followed was closer than anyone anticipated, but in the end, the proposal passed by a margin of 7 to 5. As the council adjourned, Councillor Okafor approached Helena, his expression thunderous. "You've betrayed everything you stood for, Admiral," he said in a low voice. "Everything you built." Helena met his gaze steadily. "What I built, Councillor, was a defense mechanism for a wounded species. It served its purpose. Now it's time to build something else." Later, as Helena returned to the observation deck with Commander Chen, the younger officer finally asked the question that had clearly been on her mind. "Admiral, if I may ask, what changed your mind?" Helena considered the question carefully. "Time, Commander. Perspective. And perhaps the realization that while isolation protected us from external threats, it could not protect us from ourselves." She gestured toward the stars visible beyond New Eden. "Out there somewhere are the descendants of species I once called friends. Vongnil diplomats who shared meals in my home. Makari scientists who collaborated with human researchers. Even Tellarite merchants, who for all their bluster, dealt fairly with us." Her expression grew distant. "And somewhere out there are the ghosts of species who wronged us, or whom we wronged. The jackal, whose extinction will forever be our burden to bear. The assembly representatives, who turned their backs on us in our hour of need." Helena turned to face Commander Chen directly. "Your grandmother understood something that took me much longer to grasp. Vengeance, no matter how justified, extracts a price from those who exact it. We eliminated the jackal, but adopted their belief that military power is